So I think with Ableton Meld, it's a fairly new synthesizer to Ableton 12, but it's pretty amazing because it can do a lot of timbral things, multi-timbral sounds. Think of playable textures. You know, the really famous thing in Omnisphere, which is a third-party synth, was you would go into this little hidden sample-based menu and do the playable textures and all these different sounds. You know, they have unique timbres to them, but they're also playable because the pitch is consistent. And that's essentially what Meld can do. I think the one thing about the synthesizer in Ableton is that it has this really deep modulation matrix. We have things called cross modulation, and a lot of people look at this synth and go, I don't even know where to begin. And I really don't blame them. So in this video, I just want to show you a really simple way to modulate between the two different timbres and create a textured sound that's playable, really cool for different styles of music. And it's pretty simple to do, believe it or not. So I'll show you right now. Now, the first thing to understand about Meld is you have two oscillators, and these are oscillators where they give you a fair amount of them, and they all have their own macro capabilities built into them, which is a pretty cool thing. And essentially it goes along with this idea of each oscillator can do very interesting things once you dive into the macro functions. The other thing that Meld is probably going to be really influential for is incorporating MPE based MIDI information. So what does that mean? If you press down on your MIDI keyboard, you might have polyphonic aftertouch, which essentially responds to the pressure of how you hit your keys. And this is similar for the Rolly hardware, which is becoming very famous now, where you can have polyphonic pitch bend. So you can move and wiggle around the notes, and your synthesizer can be programmed to respond to that. And that's where Meld also comes in as well. But even if you don't have, you know, MPE functional gear, you can essentially do really amazing cross modulation effects just following the scheme that I'm going to show you right here. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. I do post the presets to everything I create my videos down below in the description. So make sure you like and subscribe and check the description down below. So the essential idea here is you're going to have one oscillator that gives you sort of the musicality effect of something that sounds like, you know, a regular pad sound, and then maybe another oscillator that gives you a more textured sort of effect, and you can cross modulate between the two different sounds. So if I just turn this one off and play a chord, you can hear a nice pad sound coming through, and that's here in this amp envelope where I'm using typical pad sounds, or a typical pad ADSR. So I have like a slower attack, slower decay, I turn the sustain down a little bit, and a long release. And then what I actually do is hit this link button, which immediately links the envelope to the other oscillator, which is right here. And this oscillator is going to give you more of a different kind of texture sound. In this case, it almost sounds like rain. And using the modulation effects that I can do, I can have multiple things control the balance of these two different sounds. So the first thing is I go over to the modulation ADSR, and this thing I'm going to shape in a really unique way that it gives you this function. I can actually turn up the final release volume right there, and that's going to allow me to then dictate when the other sound, this crackle effect, comes in based upon this. How do I do that? When we go up to this big modulation window, you just have to know where to look. It's very intimidating, but if I go and I look over here and it says modulation envelope, it's referring to the thing that I'm using right here. And I want this to apply to adding volume to the yellow oscillator, the B oscillator. So basically what this envelope does, and you can download this preset down below if you just want to try this for yourself, but you set it up in a way where this modulation envelope is telling that textured sound to come in later on. In fact, much later on at 10 seconds. So no matter how I hit the keys, that sound will come in gradually over time. But I can do other things to control the balance of how these two sounds interact, including the performance. So again, you don't have to have an MPE, a fancy MIDI controller to do this. Things like velocity and pitch, and also the position of your mod wheel, all those things can control the balance of the sounds. It's a really simple idea. You basically go in and I go to the volume of the texture, we'll call it the texture oscillator, this oscillator B, and these are all plus values. When I go to the other side, I'm also doing the same exact thing, velocity, frequency, pitch, and mod wheel, but these have negative values. They sort of balance out based on how I want to perform the sound. And basically, how hard I hit the keys and the position that I'm at on the keyboard and the position of the mod wheel, that dictates the balance of the two oscillators in the performance. And that's basically it. You could imagine having this modulation set up this way, where you can do other things with the filters, obviously, and you can modulate those things as well. But basically, those parameters are going to have the expression of how you play and how you ride the mod wheel as you play chords to dictate the balance of the two oscillators. So my mod wheel is in a lower position. You get a slightly more pure sound. But as I turn that mod wheel up, I'll get a more heavy rain effect. And then as I brought that mod wheel down, the rain effect decreased very naturally. So it's a really cool thing for expressive playing and getting a textured, playable sound. Essentially, you could go with this modulation style and then just switch out the different oscillators. And the really cool thing about Meld is I would say every oscillator is radically different than the other. So it's not a super long list compared to something like Wavetable, which has several submenus. A lot of people don't know about that. But Meld, while it might not have as many oscillators, it does have every oscillator with a very interesting macro function. So you can explore that, and then sort of towards the bottom of the list, they tend to become more texture based. You have things like bubble or rain or crackle or bit grunge, and these give you a lot of really interesting textures that you can filter into the sound. Now, of course, it goes without saying that I do a lot of my own post-processing when I create presets, which you can download down below. Like I might use an EQ after the actual meld, including a bunch of parallel processing to give me even more stuff, including also expression control. I won't go into a bunch of stuff about expression control, but if you are on Ableton Live 12, that's another thing that you can incorporate into your patches to just have extremely expressive programming into the sounds that you're creating. So yeah, there's a ton of creative possibilities you can do with this, right? You can change out the oscillators and just use this simple modulation setup, which is really useful. If you guys like the presets that you heard in this video, you can download them down below. I've got a bunch of other stuff there, my own Midi library, templates, packs, different long form tutorials, really cool stuff to check out. And if you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe. It does a whole lot to support the channel and the work I do. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have fun making music.